Thank you very much for that, Helen. Right, I'll share my screen. This is where the technical hitches may start, but fingers crossed we'll all be good. So as Helen said, we are a young people's substance misuse service, so just bear with me. Hopefully this works. Oh, it's gone back to not where I wanted it to be. Bear with me. Apologies for this.
Know me.
Sorry about that. See, I told you the technical hitches would start from the get-go. Here we go. Right, so as I said, we are the Young People's Drug and Alcohol Service for under 18s in Northumberland. We work with young people who are wanting support around their substance use. And the substances that we discuss are all your traditional substances, as you can imagine, legal and illegal substances, alcohol as well, and volatile substances such as gas, glues and aerosols and nitrous oxide, and over-the-counter prescription medication. At the moment, we're not taking referrals just for vaping or nicotine use, but we know that this is like quite a big gap, like nationally actually, and it is something that we're working with our commissioners around, because we're getting multiple referrals around this, as we know it's becoming quite a big issue. In terms of how we work, it's very much based on what the young person's needs are. So if they are open to getting information but aren't wanting to make changes, we're not in the sort of ability to say, well, we're going to make you change. That's not our standpoint. It is very much around building up their knowledge and understanding of the substances that they're using and potential risks that they could be taking, and trying to support them to reduce those risks and allow them to keep themselves safe. Within that, we will start looking at a bit of motivational work, and sort of discussing the pros and cons of their use, and hopefully guide them through and encourage maybe a reduction or a control plan, and ideally abstinence if that's what they want. But it's very much led by them. So it goes into that more structured treatment where possible, which is more sort of counselling, therapeutic based, giving them, you know, those skills and knowledge for life, really, to support with permanent change. So this is the cycle of change. I'm sure many of you will have come across it through your time, and we work through it with them, and obviously some young people come into service in that pre-contemplation state, sort of trying to appease a parent or a teacher saying, well, actually, I don't want change, I don't see it as an issue. And really, we're there to sort of guide them through that. So in an ideal world, we work with them around this, but with the understanding that there will be times when people have slips, there will be times when people go backwards, but that's not a failure. It's about learning, so why did that happen, and what can we do differently another time? And sharing this cycle with young people is quite empowering, because you know, it allows empathy between us all, because everybody's made a change at some point in their life. And so as well with their parents, if they've allowed us to share information with them, you know, sharing this information with them is useful too. So just in terms of what we know nationally is happening with young people, it's surprising when we share this with professionals who are working in social care and other situations. But what we're seeing is that actually young people are using substances less and less. And in a recent survey, I mean, it's not totally recent, but there has been a new one done 2023, but the results haven't been published yet. But it is reducing. So cannabis is actually the most common substance that we work with, and actually only 6% of all young people are using it on a regular basis or in the last year. So it's not as significant as everybody feels it is. When we talk this through with young people in assemblies, they're like, well, that's not right. That can't be right. Kids will be lying. And there's a potential that these results will be skewed because it's done in senior schools. However, it's the same patterns each time it's done. So that would exist each time. What I didn't mention is, as a service, we sit within social care. So we're quite unique for Northumberland as a young people service, in that we sit within the local council. There are services like ours in every county, in every city, but they can sit in different places dependent upon their funding stream. And we're quite fortunate because we then work in a very multi-agency way, working with the agencies that are working with that young person and the families, and supporting them in the best way that we can, where information is allowed to be shared. So you can probably tell I'm not from Northumberland or Newcastle. I'm originally from Derbyshire, and I've worked in young people's services for quite a long time, but specifically in young people's drug and alcohol services since 2005. And actually, what the statistics show in terms of what substances are being used has very much stayed similar for a while, with fluctuations. And it's a national similarity. So when I was a drug worker in Derbyshire, cannabis was always our main substance that we worked with. And this statistics that you can see here is about the young people that come into treatment, so come into services like ours, and the substances that they use within the last 28 days. So 90% of young people in our service and services like ours across the UK are using cannabis. Then about 50% alcohol, and then ecstasy and cocaine. That tends to fluctuate dependent upon popularity, and also what's available. Worryingly, what we're noticing as a recent trend, probably within the last couple of years, is that solvent use, so aerosols particularly, are becoming quite quite popular with the younger age, so between sort of, I would say, 12 to 14. I have got my colleague with me, which I didn't introduce, apologies Craig, and he will interject if I get anything like not wrong, because obviously I'm never wrong, but if I miss anything. As you can see, heroin and crack are at the top, and if it was an adult service, they would be sort of flipped upside down. So there'd be the majority of the service users would be using those or have them as their main drug of choice or main problematic substance. What we find across young people services is that there will be pockets of young people using heroin and crack, unfortunately. Often is the case, it's due to the adults in their life or the adults that they're exposed to. And sadly, these can be young people who are being exploited. And so it's working in a multi-agency way to support them. But fortunately, as I say, we don't have a lot of that around Northumberland. That's not to say it doesn't exist. But fortunately for our young people, it's not happening. So what we wanted to do this afternoon was to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour of substances that we see in Northumberland, but that's also seen nationally. So if you are not in Northumberland today, these drugs will come across your areas, and there will be a sorted, so a young people's drug and alcohol service in where you live, and that can be found online. So it's a simple way of looking at substances is to break them into these 4 categories: depressants, stimulants, opium-related painkillers, and hallucinogens. And the idea of breaking them down into these as professionals or people who don't work with them on a daily basis is if you've got a young person or an adult, for that fact, who says, I've had this substance or I've taken this thing, this is how I'm feeling. This will allow you to say, well, I think that's a depressant, that comes with these risks and these effects. This is sort of support I can give them to keep themselves safe. So hopefully by the end of this sort of 45-minute session, you will have more information that will make you feel more confident, because we all know when we go onto Google, we get a wealth of information and some of it isn't factual. So hopefully you will have that by the end of this. So in terms of depressants, this isn't stuff that necessarily makes you feel sad. Although we know substances really do impact on mental health, it's in that moment, these aren't drugs that will make your mood change to the lower. It's about how it impacts on your body as a whole. So how I like to look at it, it's a bit like the brake on a car. So the more you brake your car, the slower your car will become. And eventually, with depressant substances, you can stop your car from working, essentially stop your heart from beating. These substances include benzodiazepines, which tend to be prescription medication, and then alcohol, and as I mentioned before, solvents. Now, the vast majority of people in this country, adults and young people alike, have either tried alcohol or use it on a regular basis. And actually, some statistics came out from a study, I think it was last week, the week before. And actually, the UK have the highest number of young people who have tried alcohol or are using it on a regular basis compared to other areas of Europe and America, which is a concern in terms of health, but also like long-term addiction and other impacts on brain function and health. So yeah, it is a worry. The reason why though people are using depressants is due to being relaxed or wanting to get that chilled out feeling, or managing anxieties or other side effects. The major risk, as I mentioned, is that the more you take of depressants, the slower your heart can become, the slower your breathing can become, and they can be fatal in large amounts. And alcohol particularly, and benzodiazepines, come with that physically addictive side to them, where you become unwell if you don't have them. For us, though, solvents is one of the substances that worries us the most if a young person's using those, because there is no safe message that we can share with them, no way that they can keep themselves safer, no harm reduction message. These can kill instantly, and that can happen in a number of ways. Firstly, if you spray it on your skin, it feels really cold. If you spray that directly into your throat, you have a nerve at the back of your throat that could swell and therefore suffocate you. Also, the main way is called sudden sniffing death syndrome. And this is where normally we have a nice regular heart rate. You'd see it on a heart monitor, nice strong beat. When it comes to solvents, though, what happens is we get a fluttery heart rate and quite irregular. So then any extra pressure that's put on your heart, whether that's somebody walking into your room unexpectedly, or you even walking down a set of stairs after using this, could cause a heart attack. And in these instances, we would work with families, we would breach confidentiality, and we'd share that information with parents, so that they understood that if they were to find their children, obviously it would be really difficult, but to stay as calm as possible, open doors and windows to ventilate the space, remove the solvent if you could, and stay with them until they came sort of back to normal, which could take 45 minutes to an hour, dependent upon how much they'd had. If someone is unconscious on this, it is a matter of ringing 999, because you don't know where things are up to and they can't tell you. And if you start shaking them or trying to shout at them, that could be the thing that jerks their heart. So it is very much, they call it like Russian roulette, or playing with a loaded gun. Obviously, these also come with the risk of lowered oxygen in your bloodstream. So that can mean people faint or pass out. Which if the body's feeling like it's got a poison in, often is the case, someone will be sick. So if they're on their own and they've passed out, they could choke on their vomit. So really quite worrying, dangerous substances, solvents. Like I say, that we can't offer those harm reduction messages, whereas with the other substances we would do that. So then we've got stimulants. So as you'd imagine, these are opposite of depressants. These speed the body up. As you can see, these are all sort of pills and powders, amphetamines, cocaine, crack. Caffeine and nicotine, nicotine particularly for people, they're always quite surprised that this is a stimulant, because they think, well, I always feel a bit calmer when I've had my tab or my vape. And actually what's happening is they're meeting their addiction. And often's the case, they're taking a break from the thing that's causing them stress or worry. They might be going outside, walking away from their computer or their parents, or their husband or wife, and yeah, going to take that time away. And so we sort of try to get young people to reflect on what is actually happening in that moment of time, particularly if they're not yet addicted, why they're feeling calmer. And then ecstasy or MDMA. So what you can see on your screens is in the top right hand corner, they're like classic ecstasy tablets, all different colors, different shapes, and different logos on them. And then in the middle there, that is probably cocaine. And I say probably because the reality of these, with them being pills and powders, is that you don't know what you're getting. And just because something looks like what you think you're getting doesn't mean it is. And really, unless you try it, you don't know. So we know the safest way around using substances isn't to start using them at all. However, the nature of the beast is that people are curious. They also want to make changes that aren't quick to do. And substances can be that flick of the switch change. The bottom right-hand corner is either methamphetamine or crack cocaine, likely to be crack cocaine, which is more of the crystallized form of cocaine. So these substances will give people energy, confidence, be talkative, but what they're doing is they're using your happy chemicals, so releasing things like dopamine and serotonin in large amounts. And what happens is that when they are used, your body then goes, depletes of those substances and then takes a while to come back up. And this is one of the risks in terms of stimulants, is that people get into a cycle of use and the psychological addiction because they don't like the feeling of that rebooting, which is often called a come down, where they might feel low for quite a few days, not be able to sleep or eat properly, feel quite depressed, the opposite of how they were feeling when on it. So they take more, which creates that cycle. As I mentioned, these are all pills and powders, so you don't know what you're getting. And what we know currently with cocaine and MDMA, is that these are getting stronger and more pure, which for some young people will be like, brilliant, I'm getting more bang for my buck. But actually what's happening is if their body's not used to that, so they've not built a tolerance up to that, they're used to more impure substances, we're finding more young people are ending up in hospital. And the big risk around this is about people's bodies, internal body temperature increasing significantly. Because as you'd imagine, if you're getting more energetic, particularly if you're dancing in a club, you're using a lot more energy, your heart's beating faster, your body's getting hotter. So your body's natural way of cooling down is to then sweat. However, if you don't drink enough, you become dehydrated and then your body can't then cool down. So automatically people might be thinking, well, just drink water, and that's fine, but too much water can be dangerous as well. And I'm sure that some of you will be aware that in the sort of 90s there was a girl called Leah Betts, and all the headlines were saying that she died because of ecstasy use, and she sort of did, but she was in a house party, not in a rave, not in a club. She knew that she needed to use low amounts slowly because she didn't know what she was having and she had no tolerance, so she had half a pill. But then she also read that she needed to drink a lot of water, and from what I've read, she had about 7 litres in less than 2 hours, which meant that her body kind of drowned. Our brains are so full of water that her brain swelled and she went into a coma, and sadly she died. So it is a bit like walking a tightrope with these substances. You don't know what you're getting, you don't know how it's going to make you feel, and then you don't know the end results of it. And it can be very dodgy. And then we've got opium-related painkillers. So as I mentioned, we don't see a lot of opiate use. So this is your heroin, codeine, oxycodone, fentanyl, and something called lean, which I'll explain in a little bit. They do obviously in adult services, and where we see these the most in young people's areas is it within the secure estate. So that's either in the prison service or secure children's homes. These substances will give a rush of pleasure, but also make people feel numb from emotional and physical pain, almost like being wrapped in cotton wool. Lean is something that, as you can imagine, has come over from the States. They have codeine-based cough syrup that they can get from their chemist. Fortunately, we don't in this country. However, because of the joys of things like drill music and grime, people have heard of lean, and so they've Googled it and know that it's codeine. So people are getting cough syrup, crushing codeine up, put it in there, adding a soft drink and making a concoction. The difficulty there is you don't know how much you're getting, you don't know your dosage, and that can cause massive overdose. Sadly, something else that's coming through at the minute is called nitazines, which is a bit like fentanyl, so synthetic opioid, and that's coming into the UK quite a bit. These are massively stronger than heroin. People are describing like the equivalent of a grain of sand of a nitazine could put you into overdose. But if somebody doesn't know that that's what they've bought, you know, they can't prepare themselves for that. These are dangerous for many reasons. They all come with a physical addiction, but also they come with the same side effects as a depressant. So they slow your body down, they slow your heart rate down. And they can obviously cause massive overdoses where people can die. So for our young people or anybody really, these are substances to avoid, particularly if you've experienced trauma, because they feel like they're fixing a problem that you've not been able to solve. And that's where it can become very problematic. And then lastly, we've got hallucinogens. So these are substances that change your perception, what you see, what you hear, and can be as subtle as just something tasting differently or music sounding different, to seeing and hear things that aren't there. So these substances, as you can imagine, are LSD, magic mushrooms, ketamine and DMT, but also cannabis will fit into this category, because we know that it can be very varied for different people. And ecstasy, some people do talk about hallucinogen effects on taking them. So with these, our main concern isn't necessarily about the physical effects to someone's health. It's more about their experience whilst on them, which normally is related to who they're with and where they're at and how they felt before they started using. So if someone's got a mental health issue or like get paranoid when using other substances, we would really recommend not to even dabble with these, because you can't control your experience. So those little tabs in the top right hand corner have got acid on them. Don't know how much they've got on, but it could have one drop, which could last anywhere from 6 hours onwards. So if someone's having a negative experience or a bad trip, that could go on and be really quite terrifying. And if they're with people who aren't going to look after them or feel unsafe in their surroundings, and we know how unsafe Northumberland can be in the countryside, it's beautiful, but it can come with trips and falls. There's rivers, there's the seas, there's hills that can cause risks all by themselves. So added in, you know, seeing and hearing things that aren't there, that's what can cause massive issues. We've also got within these flashbacks that people can experience, and this is where months or weeks after they've had that tab, they can be experiencing the trip all over again, but not whilst under the influence, which can be very, very disconcerting. So yeah, for us, this isn't about the physical health, it's the more the mental health side effects that can come from this, and it can permanently sort of change how people see or think about things afterwards. What you guys might have heard of in the last sort of probably 20, maybe not quite 20 years, but around about that, is something called legal highs or novel psychoactive substances, so NPS. There was a spike of these around sort of 2014, I would say. And these were all substances that mimicked what we've just talked about. So you would have NPS depressants, NPS stimulants, and this was to try and get around the law. they were much stronger than what people expected. And one of the main ones that people came across and had was something called spice. So spice is a synthetic cannabis, cannabinoid, and it basically mimics or is similar to cannabis. What we're finding now, though, it like 2016, it kind of disappeared once they became illegal. And also the young people that had been using them at that point got a bit scared of them. They were having really negative experiences, like seizures, passing out, being quite aggressive and paranoid. And so people stopped doing them. But because of the increase of vaping, people are now buying what they think is liquid THC. And THC is the active chemical in cannabis that gets you stoned. And so young people are thinking, well, I'm kind of being a bit healthier because I'm not smoking tobacco with it and I'm not inhaling the fumes that way. And, you know, although vaping, we know it has got loads of problems with it, it's safer than smoking. However, they're not necessarily getting liquid THC or anything that's close to cannabis. In about Wedanos, which is a national drug treatment, drug testing service, they had some research and they found that about 43% of the ones that they tested were in fact spice. So young people are having very different degrees of experience with these. There was an incident in a high school in Northumberland about 2 years ago where 3 young people all had the same THC vape. One young person got stoned, as you would imagine. One young person had no effects at all and felt like it didn't do anything for them. And sadly, the third young person had almost quite a psychotic episode, very aggressive to staff, to other young people, and had quite a scary experience for like almost an hour, which then had massive knock-on effect for the rest of their sort of life. So that's something to really be mindful of if people are using these things. What we know in terms of substances is it's not a black and white science, and everybody gets affected by them differently. And this is sort of a diagram that shows that all these different factors make up the experience that somebody has. So I kind of see it as like a bit of a recipe for a cake. And when we share this with young people, it allows them to see the things that they can control. Obviously, they don't always know what they're having specifically until they've taken it, as I said, but they can manage the amount and how the speed that they take it in. And all of this will add up to the experience that they have, good, bad, or otherwise. But also recognizing that just because their friend's okay doesn't mean they will, because they're different sizes, different tolerance, different experiences, and also have different moods and mental health and physical health difficulties. So that adds into the mix. And then obviously who they're with and where they're at, and knowing how they're getting home, and all of that stuff that comes with use, it adds into the pot and creates their personal experience. And it's trying to share that with young people so that they kind of don't just go with the flow and recognize that they have to take control and manage their own experience and use. And as I say, ideally, the safest way is to not use at all. So this is a lovely little video, and you'll have a break from my dulcet tones. And this basically is about Lorne and his experience of cannabis use. And it really does fit very well with a lot of the young people that come to our service, and how use changes over time, and it sort of accelerates through time. So we'll have a look at this, and then we've got a few more slides, and then we'll have questions.
I'd been kicked out of my home, none of my old friends wanted to know me, and my chances of becoming a professional footballer died. I'm Lorne, I'm a football fanatic. I like to keep busy, jogging when I have spare time, gym, and I think I'm a friendly guy. As a teenager, I played football at a professional level. For me personally, it was a huge achievement. Started a new college to pursue my dreams of being a footballer. A lot of my other friends they weren't with me and I was alone. So I had to find a new group of friends. I could tell that they weren't all like me, but I had no one else there, so I was willing to just hang out with them at break and lunch because I didn't want to be alone. I remember it was one lunchtime. They were smoking weed. One of them asked me if I wanted some. At first I said no. Then after a while they kept asking. I think peer pressure just built on me, and eventually just said yeah, and from there everything went wrong, really. The first couple of times I got high, I didn't like it as much. It was okay. It made my head go lightheaded, and I got heavy eyes, and then my body just relaxed.
Cannabis increases the release of dopamine, which affects the brain's reward pathways, reinforcing pleasurable behaviour. As cannabis can make users feel more relaxed and less anxious or high, it can also cause them to want to maintain these sensations, leading to longer-term use and even addiction.
I went from doing it once a week to maybe 3 times a week now. It was weird because I didn't expect it to happen, and I didn't even notice how much I was using it at the time. I started to feel the need to bunk off college a bit, which is something I would never have done before, to go chill out with these boys and smoke weed. And it started to get worse and worse. It got to a stage where I was getting in trouble at college. It got really bad. Started smoking so much weed, I started to get lazy. They kicked me out of college and then formed a semi-professional team. It affected me big time. I was always walking around on the football pitch, and that wasn't me. Fitness, I couldn't run for more than 5 minutes at once. Started missing training, only turning up when I wanted to, when I felt in the mood for it. And they kicked me out as well. My decision-making was terrible at that point. Because I became a lazy person, I was always taking the lazy option.
Although cannabis makes users feel high, it also has a number of physical and psychological side effects. As the body relaxes, its coordination is impaired and reaction times decrease, affecting the user's attention and concentration, leading to a feeling of inactivity or laziness.
At this point in my life now, I'm smoking every day, so I'm always high, I didn't think much about what I was doing. The effect at home it was messing everything up, because my grandmother, living with her, she knew something was wrong, so we started to fall out. I grew distant from my sisters, brothers. I started to feel like I couldn't go without it. I was at a stage in my life where I needed to do it, so I was dependent on it. You feel me? As soon as I woke up, I'm thinking about it, so that's dependency right there in itself, no? I think at this point I was addicted. I've gone from a positive person to a very, very negative person in the space of a couple of months, and it was only getting worse. And then arguing with my grandmother every day. Then I don't think she had another choice, she had to kick me out. And one of my friends said I could come stay with him. At this point, when I'm living with my friend and we're smoking every day, I gave up on wanting to be a professional footballer. I wasn't talking to none of my family at this stage. I could have been sleeping under a bridge, and they wouldn't have known. The paranoia was the worst for me. I couldn't go into public places because I thought that people were staring at me, constantly staring and talking about me. Walking home at nights, I was always looking over my shoulder. So I'm at this point in my life with my friend, living at his, smoking weed every day. We're driving around, and I was smoking cannabis in the car with him, getting up to no good. And then out of nowhere, we've gone off the road and crashed. Really bad crash. Gone to hospital from there and found out that I've broken my arm in 5 places. That day for me was the scariest point because I thought like my whole life could have finished there. And I wasn't even 20 yet, you know, I still had so much to offer. And it wasn't going the way I wanted it to go. I was just sitting in a hospital bed day and night, you know, not smoking. It gave me a chance to think about things, think about what I was doing and what I should be doing and how to change. One of my old football friends, he turned up and he had football and his football boots in his hand. And that gave me a feeling that I wanted to walk around in my football boots again rather than with a spliff in my hand. Smoking weed, yeah, you're having fun, you're enjoying yourself, but there's so many consequences, and I lost a lot of things that I shouldn't have. Shouldn't have let myself get that low. If I had a second chance, what would I have done differently? I would have walked away that first day that they asked me if I wanted to try it, 100%.
That's a nice place to stop the video. Obviously, those statistics are from 2012, but as you can see from the statistics from 2021, things have, like, young people are using substances less and less. What we know about cannabis, though, is that it is in the last 20 years or so, it has got increasingly stronger. The majority of cannabis now is, like you can see in that top right-hand corner, is the flowering part of the plant, the bud. Whereas in the late 90s, mid-90s, the majority of cannabis in the UK was resin, which is the hard brown block that you burn and crumble into joints or bongs. And the cannabis that's grown in the UK is like highly, it's like hybrids of different strengths and strains, which means that the THC, so the chemical, has got higher. So in the 90s, you were looking at about sort of 1% THC. Now you're looking at anywhere from sort of 7 to 20, upwards to 50, dependent upon oils and different compounds. So for some young people, the strength of this is really having a massive impact on their life. And yes, you can become addicted. So as you can see there, they're the withdrawal symptoms that people would feel if not smoking, particularly when they're smoking daily. And a lot of our young people are, and these are the things that they experience. The words in red, though, are the reasons why they then continue to use it. And so young people, what happens is THC takes 28 days to 30 days to come out of your system. It has to go through your liver many times. And so what happens is when they're using it daily, their THC levels are very high. And as they sleep, those THC levels start to drop, or as they go to school, THC levels start to drop. And in that time, that's when they start to feel these things. And so their aim is to get rid of those, so they smoke. Our job as drug workers is to support them with a reduction plan, is to look at how they can put other strategies in to manage these feelings and emotions. Nothing bad will happen to them, like physically, by coming off cannabis. However, they will not enjoy that experience, particularly when not sleeping. What we see, particularly when we're in the secure states where they haven't got access to cannabis, is after sort of 2 weeks, they are feeling so much better. And after a month, it's like they've never really, they can do without it and they don't want it. So these are questions to ask yourselves or your loved ones who might be using substances, or the people that you're working with, just as a starting point. Non-judgmental questioning that makes them start to think about their use, because so often when you're in a habit of any form, you don't see those negatives. You only see what's making it slightly less bad for you. And with substance use, it is an instant thing. So it is about, you know, getting them to have greater understanding of their use and those impacts. So if they're in any debt, if it's having an impact on relationships, a negative effect on school life, or, you know, even more significant onto debt, which could lead to county lines. And Northumberland is definitely part of that. Like, we are not exempt. There's quite a lot, sadly, of young people that are being manipulated and exploited into either criminal or sexual behaviours because of substance use or other forms of grooming. And, you know, those young people are victims. They aren't bad. They aren't doing it for the lifestyle. They are really entrenched into something pretty horrendous. So it's trying to sort of keep that in mind if young people that you're working with, or adults for that matter, are being manipulated or exploited. But again, as I say, without going off on a tangent, these are sort of signs of, and these are questions that you could start asking people that you're working with. As I mentioned at the beginning, if we have a young person who isn't wanting to make changes, who's quite confident that their use is positive for them, we need to give them the skills to keep themselves safer. For me, the biggest one is around looking after each other and being with people you trust when using. Sadly, while I was a drug worker in Derbyshire, we had 2 young people who passed away. And what the learning from that sadly came from was that young people need to know that if they ring an ambulance, the police won't attend unless there's a child, their parent is overdosing and the child needs to be looked after. So because what happened with these 2 young people is they'd had a mixture of alcohol and ecstasy, and they were overheating, and their friends wanted to protect them from getting into trouble because they're using an illegal substance. So they were trying to look at like home remedies and things to help them. And by the time they realized that they couldn't bring their temperature down, it was too late. And so that for us was really important message to get across to all young people and adults for that matter, to stay with somebody, to look after them and share that information with the paramedics, because they're treating them as an ill person, not a criminal, not a drug user, an ill person that needs to get better, and they can do that with more information. So it's about sharing that. This isn't about condoning drug use, it's about allowing people to have the skills and knowledge to keep themselves safe. So this is our service, as I said. We'll take some questions shortly. I mentioned a couple of times, we are confidential, but that doesn't mean that kids can tell us everything and we'll keep it to ourselves. Obviously, if they tell us anything where we feel they're a risk to themselves or a risk from other people significantly, we will share that with the people in their life. But we need to create that safe space for them to talk honestly and openly. We take referrals online or over the phone through that number there. We cover all of Northumberland, so from Berwick to Haltwhistle and all the places in between, and we go to where the young people are. We see them where they feel most comfortable. So I think I have covered everything, so I'll stop sharing my screen now. Okay, back in the room. Hello, everybody. Have we had any questions throughout that, Helen or Craig?